So this is probably going to be a little shorter of a 5 things video. I feel like you could do a 15 or 20 or 25 things that Arkham City or even Arkham Asylum did right, and you'd just be scratching the surface. But today in our 5 things they did right series, we want to take a look at 5 things that Batman Arkham City did very well. So hey, you're joining me again today. I appreciate having you here.
It's great to be back. Arkham City is probably my favorite in the series, and I mean, I go back and forth, and so do you, about all of them, because it's a fantastic video game franchise, but City consistently stays at the top for me, and one of the things that stands out right away is the villains, and that's our number one thing, is the villains. And I think between Hugo Strange, Ra's al Ghul, Joker, obviously, I won't go into spoiler. Well, can we do spoilers, I guess?
Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Yeah, these games have been out for years. If you're watching this video and you don't want spoilers, you should just get out of here.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, I love having you here. You can mute the video and watch it. That helps me. Anyways,
that's a good way
go into spoilers.
No, I would say, so Clayface even showing up was great.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic twist.
Oh,
There were so many, and even some of the side missions. Like you had a fun one with Deadshot. You had some really good ones with Azrael, Hush. So, I mean, the villains, really, overall, you had nice stories. They were obviously very well voice acted. As far as the voice acting, it was great. So, the villains, for me, push the story along very well. And you need great villains to have a great... And that's not even to mention Two-Face, Catwoman, all that stuff.
Yeah, a lot of them barely show up, but they show up, not enough for some people. Like, fans of Two-Face would want to see more of him. But for the sake of this story, I think they're in it enough.
And some people do argue, I think, that there was too much, or that it was approaching too much.
Yeah.
I loved how much there was. I loved the going from different villain to villain. There was just always someone to go to and fight. And even if it was a small thing like Bane, you saw him for, it was a super short, small mission. You find some tanks and blow them up and then go fight them quick.
Yeah, and
it's nothing big, but it's a cool cameo that they're in the world. They exist. All of these characters are there. It just feels alive.
For sure. That's not to say that there aren't some of them done better elsewhere, obviously. Like,
for sure.
Like Bane is for sure done better in Origins than he is in any other game.
Incredible.
But it's still, like, the amount of villains that are in this and still done competently is pretty impressive, I think.
I would agree.
And just their overall staying within who the character is. So the next thing we have actually is world traversal. I think this is something that did not matter in Asylum. Asylum is a very confined, claustrophobic environment. It doesn't really matter that you're not moving quickly through it. In fact, the map is small enough that if you were, it would probably really hurt the pacing of the game.
No, you're pretty much running around that game the whole time. And that's fine. That's why I think looking at the traversal, especially keeping the scope of this was after Asylum and not going back from Knight's traversal compared to City's, just kind of comparing it in its scope at the time.
Right, yeah.
It's incredible, and how you're able to glide around. It's got the boost as well, so you double tap A or X and you're flying through the city. It's a way bigger world, and compared to Asylum where you're running around, you occasionally will glide, but not really, not frequently, I guess. It's really well done in how fast you travel around the world. There's no Batmobile, there's no quick travel, there's nothing like that. So they did a really nice job of just being Batman, going above the city, and being able to get from point A to point B quickly, but also still being able to enjoy the world as that's happening.
Well, and one thing too, you mentioned the grapnel boost. That is a huge benefit to this game for traversal, but there's another one too that I don't think you mentioned, and if you did, I didn't catch it, and that's just the dive.
Yes.
Being able to dive to pick up speed is something that also added like an incredible amount of distance to your glide, and also it made it easier to actually encounter like villains outside. I do think there's not quite enough outside combat in this game. A lot of it in the story takes place in buildings, but in the outside segments we see, like these different traversal mechanics allow Batman to get around and behind enemies and get kind of tactical advantages that work out really well for the character.
Well, you especially see that in the AR challenges too, like the dives and the boosts. Not really the boosts as much, but the diving is really how you beat those. And so, I mean, some of them were frustrating sometimes, but they were great though. I really liked the diving aspect of it, so it was a nice touch for sure.
I think so, absolutely. And I love the traversal of that. It really set a good precedent. Sadly, one that I don't think Origins lived up to, but then I think Knight actually outdid a little bit too. So this was on a good trajectory.
Definitely.
And a good way to progress the series.
Well, it started the whole traversal thing.
Yeah,
so
it really did. And then next up, we have the actual world and lore. This is something I've gone back and forth on what I like more, and I know that's not what this is about, but between Asylum and City, the lore and the world in both, they're both very intricately done and really interesting, and they're the same world, but they have a totally different vibe to them. Like, being on Asylum is totally different than being in this patch of Gotham that is now Arkham City. And they did such a good job with that. From, the Arkham City stories, which we have a little series we're doing over on the channel. Check it out, Arkham City Stories Narrated. All the way to just the actual places we see in the game, like Maxie Zeus's nightclub. Just like things showing up in the background that like really build it and bring it to life. Wonder Tower, Wonder City, all these different references and things they put in the game that really liven up the world and make it more than just a sandbox. It's a place that even though people are not in anymore other than criminals, you can tell that it's Gotham. It feels like people did live there, and they just did such a good job with that.
They did, and making it connected too, because when you're in Asylum, you've got a small glimpse into what Gotham looks like. You can see Wayne Tower. I think it's a trophy in that game where you can see Wayne Tower from across. Then you move to City, and you look across and you can see Asylum with all the plants coming out of it. So it's cool how it's all connected, I guess, is how they do it. They keep the story, they keep everything flowing well, and you see it in the environment changing within Gotham as well. But in City, the environment itself is such a change from Asylum, like you said, but they do it in such a way that's really alive compared to Asylum, I feel, especially after the game, I should say. After you beat Asylum, it kind of slows down. It's just more of exploring this.
It's just Riddler.
It's just Riddler, essentially. This, after you beat it and you're exploring the world, there's still dialogue going on. You still have some side missions going on to do. There's a lot of things going on in the world, and Riddler trophies add a lot. And I mean, there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
There's 440, I think, with Catwoman.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's an outrageous amount.
It's a bit too much, but it still does liven up the world. Like, there's stuff to do.
There's a lot of, really cool Easter eggs in there. There's some, I mean, even that one where you have to land in the perfect spot on this little boat, open it up, and then you can see a reference to Scarecrow.
Yeah, and actually a reference to the Arkham Knight storyline. Like, it teases Arkham Knight.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff here that makes the world feel like there's more there than you would think.
Yeah.
And I love that.
And characters that we still haven't seen, but you still get cameos to them, I guess, which is what we talked about in a recent video too, where it was just, you see that these characters do exist in the world, even if you don't physically fight them or run into them. Like even a Falcone and Maroni, you do see those storylines in the Arkham City stories pop up around them. And I think those stories added a lot to the world too. So
they did, and it's also worth mentioning that world was the building blocks, whether you love it or not, for the Origins world.
Definitely.
So a lot of this would be repurposed and reused in good and bad ways, and because of that, even though they didn't know it at the time, this had to be done very well, because there would be more built on this in the future, and people would look back during Night at the city and compare Night City to it.
Oh, for sure.
So it was done incredibly well. The next thing is something that we both love. I think you are even more passionate about it than me, though. And that's the story for Arkham City.
I loved the story. I like how, and not to keep comparing it to Asylum, but you go from Asylum where if you just cruise through it and are focused on it, it's maybe 6-7 hours. You're done with it, really, if you're going quickly.
Yeah, if you're just ignoring all Riddler, all everything,
Yeah, and this story is, a few hours longer, and there's so much jam-packed in there, and there's so many villains that I just loved going from point A to point B all the time. So, for me, a mission that sticks out, or like a place that we went that sticks out a lot, was Wonder City.
Yeah.
And just going in there, and the way that they kind of messed with your mind a little bit as you were in there, like Batman's like slowly dying. You go in, you're on like this like acid trip basically, going through Ra's al Ghul's world. And then, I mean, the twist with the two Jokers, obviously, I mean, that was a fantastic twist.
But you know what? It's one that's foreshadowed, because like you showed me, you can see that earlier on. I think you're the one who pointed that out to me years ago, is that if you are in that room with the Joker early on and you do the detective mode, you can see that it's not, he doesn't have any bones.
No.
just stuff like that. Like the story beats were very intentional and well written. And I think, didn't you tell me that Paul Dini consulted on this?
His name was on there. I don't know exactly what his role was, but I do know that he was involved in some capacity. Yeah.
So I think that I don't know how much, but I think that always helps.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's obvious pretty much every facet of this game's story was thought about. Whether you like it or not, somebody sat down and thought, does this make any sense?
And the dialogue was, I loved the dialogue, especially some of the lines that Joker had. They were, I laughed out loud to some of the lines that he said, and they were clever. The dialogue was well written, and his song at the end, yeah. I mean, even the voicemails that you're getting to throughout, that's part of the world too, I suppose. But I mean, it's just, the story was great. I loved it, and when I first played through it, I could not set it down. And that's for all of these games, but I mean, it was just, I needed to know what happened, and they did a great job with that, with marketing, and then as far as just starting the story off from beginning to end, I was just sucked into it, so I loved it.
I was extremely invested in the story of this game. So the fifth and last main thing we have for this video is actually the gadgets of Arkham City. Now, Arkham Asylum, we both agree, did gadgets very well. And it's one of those games that it was the first one that made you feel like Batman with Asylum, where it's like, oh man, I have access to this arsenal. And then City just sort of expanded on it. And it's not by that much, but it makes it just different enough, and with just enough like additional gadgets that you have access to, that it feels like I'm Batman. I don't not have access to that other stuff because, you know, game design, they just threw it out, but because this is what fits Batman in this scenario. It fits Batman more that I am able to use this freeze cluster grenade here versus something else. You know, like Batman didn't need the triple Batclaw in this game, so it wasn't there.
100% true. There was the added gadgets, but then they also added certain things, I think like you said, to gadgets that were already existing. So like the cryptographic sequencer.
Yep.
With that, you were able to tune into the radio, and there were Easter eggs within that radio, where like in Asylum, you were just cracking the codes and opening doors. With this, there was actual radio, signals that you had to get to the right signal with. And then you would find certain either Easter eggs or parts of the story that would help you get to where you need to go. So that was just a small thing that I added to an already existing gadget, but then you add in the freeze cluster, the freeze blast, the disruptor, that would, take out guns. There was the mine detonator, so you could, if a thug planted a mine and then just stood up, you could blow it up in their face, basically, and knock them out. So there was really
even
cool...
the REC, actually.
Yeah, exactly, with the electricity as well. Yeah, and you could put those into combat, into Predator, into exploring the world. You needed it to find Riddler trophies. So they used the gadgets, and you had these gadgets, and there was a function for all of them. So you needed every single one of them to accomplish your goal, and they incorporated into the game so well into all the different facets of the game. It's definitely something that should be included on what was done right, I think.
Well, and even for a last point with that, the fact that you can take something as easy as the smoke pellet and think, well, why can't he weaponize that? Why can't he throw that at enemies other than just dropping it on the ground in front of him? And they bring that into the game.
Yes.
So this kind of started that pattern of being able to chuck a smoke pellet down into a bunch of people. They all get disoriented. You swoop in.
Right.
Like, they just upped the tactical abilities of Batman with these gadgets extremely.
Which is why it feels like such an upgrade combat and Predator-wise compared to Asylum. There's just more ways to do what you want to do. And it doesn't take away from the fact of you take out the thugs how you want to in Asylum and City, but it just gives you more options on how to do so in City.
Yeah, it's a little less basic and rudimentary because it's not in a confined spot.
Right.
So I think that worked out extremely well. So hey, that is our list of 5 things that Arkham City did very well in our opinion. We are thinking actually eventually of coming back to these lists and doing 5 more things of each. So let us know what you think about that, or if you have suggestions for that for the future. That probably won't be for a while off. But also, just wanted to point out, the Patreon is up. I'll have the link for that in the description as always. The Twitter link is in the description. Let us know what you think about the video and your suggestions, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a fantastic day.